All right, everybody, we're nearly live on Facebook. Facebook had me confirm my age before I could push us live to Facebook tonight. That was new. All right, everybody, welcome to tonight's event. We are so excited to virtually have Chris Benziger here in New Hampshire with us. Happy Friday. It's Friday. Let's have some wine. Also on the line tonight, we have Lisa Goslin, our wine marketing specialist, and we also have Megan and Joe behind the scenes. So between the four of us and Chris, if you have any questions or concerns, we've got you. Before we get started, I would just like to tell you all a quick little story. So Chris was actually one of the first winemakers that I ever interviewed in my time working with the Liquor Commission. So I've got a blog post that I wrote after talking to him on the phone and meeting him during Wine Week that I'm going to share in the comments and in the chat here on Zoom. I'm very proud of this post because it is all still true. It's a pretty evergreen post. And Chris, thank you for letting me hang out with you 6 years ago and tonight.
Awesome. I'm glad I haven't changed that much. The beard's definitely a little whiter, a little more gray.
You didn't have a beard actually the first time we met, so that's a change.
This is from the fire. So I started growing a beard in the 17 fires. So I haven't shaved it off yet.
Well, everybody, I'm going to turn things over to Chris. If you have any questions or concerns, please go ahead, leave a comment in the Zoom chat or on the Facebook on the comment section, and I'll take care of you. So Chris, without further ado, let's have some wine.
All right. Yeah, everybody, crack that Sauvignon Blanc or the Chardonnay, whichever one you have. And let's start the weekend. Cheers, everybody. Chris Benziger here. Thank you so much for joining us here on virtually anyway. But I feel a kindred spirit to New Hampshire because my brother, Jerry, lives up there, up in, I guess it's called the Lakes area. He's on Newfound Lake. He decided that the sun and fun of California was too much. So he went back to New Hampshire just to keep himself balanced, you know, a little bit on the East Coast, a little bit on the West Coast, makes for a nice balanced individual. Anyway, everybody, thank you so much. So many of you probably have heard my family's name. We've been around for almost 40 years. We're like to think of ourselves as kind of the OG winemaking family out here in Sonoma. My brother started making wine in 1973. And then he was able to piper the rest of us out to California. When I say family, I really mean it. I got a large clan here. I got 4 other brothers, 2 sisters, 19 nieces and nephews, if you can believe that. We figured out the perfect recipe for having kids, and that's no television and lots of wine. Guarantees a successful next generation for sure. But my older brother, Mike, he's the dude over in the black on the left-hand side of your screen there. My family had been in the wine business for quite a while. We were importers, small ones in New York, and we had a liquor store as well. And my brother, Mike, didn't want to sell wine. He was seeing these California wines come across the United States in the early 70s, and he was very intrigued. And he was smitten. He wanted to go out west and make wine. And he moved out, and sure enough, he got a job at a winery, cut his teeth, and after about 5 years, he came back home and he whispered in my dad's ear and said, "Let's start a family winery." And my dad, Bruno, was like, "Oh yeah, this is it." And he sat us all down to dinner. I'll never forget, it was a Sunday dinner. And he says, "Well, we're going to move out to California." We thought maybe he'd been drinking a little too much scotch, but sure enough, 6 months later, my family moved to this beautiful place in Northern California. It's about an hour north of the Golden Gate Bridge above the town of Glen Ellen. Glen Ellen is right next to Jack London State Park. And Jack London, the author of Call of the Wild, he called this place the Valley of the Moon. It really is beautiful. It's an amazing spot that Mike found. And it's kind of a cool story. He was looking all over California for a piece of property so that we could purchase it and start the family business. And he looked all the way up north into Mendocino, up into the Amador foothills, down into Monterey. And then one day he came down this driveway you see down there in your bottom center screen. And he came down that driveway and he had this epiphany that this was the place. But it didn't look like this. It was pretty ramshackle. It was an old winery that was settled in the 1860s. And then Prohibition and the 1906 earthquake put him out of business. And for 55 years, it was a ghost town. There was a doctor living there. His name was Patrick Flynn. And he was ahead of his time because he loved his marijuana. He was growing 10 acres of marijuana there and about 5 acres of Cabernet. and he mixed that together in a wine he called Cannabis Sauvignon. But that's a whole nother podcast. But my brother was able to convince the good doctor to sell the property, and we moved out. We moved out 1979. We packed up our roots from New York City. We left the streetlights and sidewalks, subways, pizza, and delis to head out to this beautiful, crazy, bucolic place called Glen Ellen. And it was a throwback. It was a 180-degree difference from what I came from in New York. And we set up shop. We fixed up the house. My mom would cook us breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and the boys and my sisters, we'd get up every morning and we'd go down and we'd build the winery. That's me in the blue shorts, my brother Mike in the red shorts, building the winery crush pad. We get up, we had one contractor, our first employee, Dale Chaffin, and he was with us up until 2 years ago when he retired, our first employee. But we built every day. We got up and got the winery going. My brother Joe, he was the strongest. He was our human forklift. His nickname was Simple Joe. He was an awesome brother, still is. And then my youngest brother, Jerry, I should say I'm the youngest, but he's the one just above me. Jerry was single at the time, and you could tell because he was rocking his sunglasses and his Daisy Dukes there. But check it out. For some reason, none of us are wearing T-shirts. I'm not sure why. Maybe we were all wanting to be California tan at the time. But believe it or not, all of our hard work culminated in this beautiful winery. And I mean that sarcastically. We hustled to try to get the winery built, and we failed miserably. The winery didn't have a roof on it completely. We didn't have our electrical, but we had to scramble, right? The grapes, they don't wait for anybody. And the first Sauvignon Blanc grapes were ready. It was 1980. It was a warm year, and we were scrambling. So literally, I remember I was a kid. I had to go down to the hardware stores and buy every extension cord to run the electrical from whatever outlets we had. We had to build that white thing in front. We called that the doom flume. So we could put the grapes across the construction site into the press. And then you see those tanker trucks. You're like, what are they there for? Well, those were actually going to be our wine tanks. Our stainless steel wine tanks were ordered, but they hadn't been delivered yet, if you can believe that. We were going to scramble. We had to find stainless steel tanks. And my father, Bruno, he survived World War II. He was a Marine in the South Pacific. He fought in the Battle of Iwo Jima. Nothing could ruffle his feathers. And he called the local junkyard, and he talked to this guy by the name of Barry Gold. And Barry Gold could have been out of Central Casting for motorcycle badass. He was amazing. He was 6'4", had the big bushy beard, the ponytail, the vest, the boots, the whole 9 yards. I was scared to death of him. My dad loved this character. My dad goes to Barry. He goes, hey, Barry, you know where to get your hands on some stainless steel tanks? I need 2 stainless steel tanks, about 1,000 gallons. And Barry, without missing a beat, goes, do you care if they got wheels? My dad's like, hey, no problem. Get them over here. I don't care if they get wings. Sure enough, Barry shows up with a tow truck towing those 2 jalopies. The one over that you can't quite see had got milk on the side of it with one of those milk models and still dripping milk. Barry had absconded them from a neighbor that owed him money. So they were dairy milk trucks. They were dripping milk by the time we got them. I remember I was the only one small enough to fit through the hatches. I scrubbed them out, and not 4 hours after these trucks arrived, the first grapes came in, and we had our first harvest. It was Sauvignon Blanc grapes, much like the one that's in your glass right now, just 41 years earlier. And believe it or not, in this incredibly rustic setting, where we didn't have any of the equipment in place, we actually made some pretty good wine. We made 3 wines that year: a Sauvignon Blanc, a Chardonnay, and a Cabernet. Well, back then there was one wine competition. It was called the Sonoma County Harvest Fair, where all the Sonoma County winemakers and all the Napa winemakers would enter their wines into this county fair. Very simple back then, because there really wasn't the Marvin Shankin and his Wine Spectator, or Robert Parker and the Wine Advocate. It was a little bit simpler then. And 752 wines were entered into this competition. And after the judging of the apple pies and the quilting and the photography contest, then the 4-H judging of the cows and the pigs, came the prestigious wine judging event. And believe it or not, our Sauvignon Blanc that was made in that blue milk truck in that half-built winery won the top honors. They called that the sweepstakes. And that put us on the map. It was amazing. It was great PR. But more importantly, it taught us something really intrinsic, is if my family could maintain that passion that we did building that winery and harvesting those grapes, then we could probably survive in this new business that my father and brother had gotten us into. And it was an amazing, amazing first harvest. It was kind of what really got us started, jump-started us in those early days. So let's talk about this Sauvignon Blanc. We're going to taste 4 wines today. You see the Sauvignon Blanc, the Chardonnay, the Pinot Noir, and the Cabernet Sauvignon. We also have a Merlot, and sometimes with a little luck, we have Rosé. So the Sauvignon Blanc, you're going to love this wine. It's made in what's called a Sancerre style. What I mean by that, 3 words: light, clean, and crisp. What we want in that Sauvignon Blanc, right? We want this wine because it's so refreshing. To get that, we harvest the grapes a little bit early, okay? So the Brix level, that's the level of sugar, is right around 22 or 23, so they're tart. We put the wines into, they go whole cluster right into the press, and we get what's called free run. Then we move it into stainless steel tanks where we let it ferment. This is the simplest wine we make. Some wineries call this Chateau Cash Flow because it doesn't see any oak. But I love this wine because its simplicity is its beauty. Then we bottle it, and lo and behold, you get a wine that has these beautiful grassy notes to it, but also because we let it sit a little bit on the lees, it has a little bit of creamy weight in the middle before it runs away. And this is wonderful with all that great seafood you guys have out there: scallops, oysters. This would go so well with a Wellfleet oyster. Unbelievable. This wine hasn't found an oyster it doesn't absolutely love. Asian cuisine would go great with little spiciness. Or, as my favorite, is just on the old patio when the sun gets warmer, or screw that, on the ski slopes when it's nice and cool, a little fondue and some Sauvignon Blanc, and that sore knee from doing the moguls will go right away. So that's the Sauvignon Blanc, an early favorite here at the Benziger family. First wine we ever made, and it's kind of our unofficial mascot. Now, the next one is the Chardonnay. Chardonnay in the Burgundy bottle there. Now, Chardonnay is a difficult grape. It's a Burgundian grape, right? But Chardonnay is amazing as a varietal for winemakers. There is no better varietal for a winemaker than Chardonnay. And this is why. It's because Chardonnay can be whatever the winemaker wants. Most varietals kind of walk you down a path on what the wine wants to be. Not Chardonnay. Chardonnay is a blank canvas. It could be a lean, tart, crisp Chablis style, or it could be the big butter bomb, butter kiss, toasty monster that on the other side, there's a wide spectrum. There's a Chardonnay for every flavor that you could think of, every mood you're in, every season you want to drink a wine, there's a Chardonnay for you. What I want to do here is make a wine that is terroir driven, meaning I don't want it to be dominated by the winemaking. That means oak. Okay, so here we get a wine that is from a really unique area called the Carneros. The Carneros is in the lowlands between Sonoma and Napa. It spreads out down there, and when the winds and fog come off the Golden Gate Bridge, they kind of come up into the San Francisco Bay and up into the Carneros area, and it settles in here. That fog is amazing because it gives us something called hang time. Hang time is really the secret weapon of this Chardonnay, because what hang time is, it's slow roasting. This weather allows these grapes to slowly ripen under the sun. So these flavors move from that green apple to this more white pear peach. That's awesome, right? Because that's going to add, keep the acid alive in the wine. You know, think about slow roasting. It's when your wonderful Italian grandmother makes that Sunday gravy, right? She practically starts it on Friday. Or when you're barbecuing, you slow roast, those flavors are more intense and more mature. That's exactly what's happening here with hang time. And another thing, because Chardonnay is thin-skinned, we harvest at night. All these grapes are harvested in the middle of the night. So the grapes are in good shape. They don't get bruised or busted on the trip to the winery. So the grapes are in pristine shape early in the morning, nice and cold. And then we put them into barrels. And we use French oak barrels here. And we barrel ferment it. But what I'm going for here is more of a creaminess as opposed to an oakiness. Again, I don't want Chateau 2x4. I don't want that big oaky monster, but I do want the cream and that kind of creme brulee, meringue kind of attitude here. Because think of that as the supporting cast that makes the aromas, the white pear and peach, more believable. And it's all tied tight with acidity. That's what makes this wine so wonderful. It's got killer acidity, and then this beautiful white pear peach, and then this underlying kind of vanilla meringue kind of running through it. A beautiful wine with a lobster roll. Oh my God, it goes so good with a lobster roll. A roast chicken, maybe a creamy pasta like a fettuccine Alfredo, just off the top of my head. Or just sitting on the deck with your favorite friend, reminiscing about some good times. That's always goes good. I find that Chardonnay goes great with pool water, sandy beaches, and all that fun stuff. The next one is Pinot Noir. It's the kissing cousin of Chardonnay. Pinot Noir actually is the queen of all the grapes, Cabernet being the king. But unfortunately, Pinot Noir is a mean queen. And what I mean by that is it's a very difficult grape. And here, for the first time, we actually leave Sonoma County because we can get better Pinot Noir grapes for this particular wine in Monterey for two reasons. One, look where Monterey is. It's a peninsula, right? It goes right out into the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean. You guys are on the Atlantic. And the Pacific Ocean kisses these vineyards practically. And in return, that fog comes in there just like the Caneros. Very similar climate. But here is the difference, limestone. We have some of the only limestone in California is in these vineyards here. It's called the Lockwood Shale. It's an old maritime deposit. And this is what Pinot Noir loves. Because if you guys know, the greatest wines in the world come from the Côte d'Or in France, and that's on a gigantic escarpment of Kimmeridgian limestone. This is not quite the same thing, but it's very similar. It's limestone. And so we grow amazing Pinot Noir here. But my family's been making Pinot Noir for over 35 years. And in those times, we've grown it up in Oregon, up in Newburgh. We've grown it down south in Santa Barbara and in 7 other different AVAs, Monterey and Sonoma being the 2 big ones. And we've learned, every time we've made Pinot Noir, we've learned it by actually making mistakes. I know that doesn't sound like a positive way of winemaking, but Pinot Noir it really is. You know, John Madden, that great coach for the Oakland Raiders, had this great saying is that success was the ultimate deodorant, meaning that when you won the game, nobody cared how you won it. You won the game. You got the W. You got the win. But there's a corollary to that. It's when you lose, you analyze everything to death. You do an autopsy, right? And every time we failed on a vintage, we failed a few times in 35 years, we figured out what the problem was. And because Pinot Noir is that difficult grape, the heartbreak grape, the Goldilocks wine, we learned to fix that. And we have a playbook now with Pinot Noir. And the first thing is location, location, location. There's very few areas in the world that grow great Pinot Noir. Oregon grows great Pinot Noir. The Sonoma Coast grows great Pinot Noir. Monterey, the San Lucius Highlands, obviously Burgundy, New Zealand. These are all areas that have very common weather patterns. And then the soils are very important, but also how you treat it now. You have to harvest it in the middle of the night, just like the Chardonnay, because again, the grape skins, they contract, they get firm, and they bounce like little balls in the bin. So they're in pristine shape when they get to the winery. No, we have to clean the fruit, make sure it's all good. You don't want to have anything, because anything that goes in to the wine, you're going to see it on the back end. And here's the most important part. We have a machine called a Palanque. This Palanque is the only real piece of technology I have on my entire crush pad. This machine actually destems the grapes gently and then spreads the grapes out over a conveyor belt in ruffles. And then my favorite part, lasers, a la Austin Powers. Our lasers track the grapes, and they go into a high-def camera that immediately takes a picture, and those pictures are analyzed, and in a second it decides if it's a good berry or a bad berry. What it kicks out are what's called the jacks, the leaves, the red fruit, the unripe fruit, and most importantly, raisins. Raisins are sugar bombs, right? If we can't get the raisins out, those raisins go back into our fermenters, and then they re-ferment in the wine. And then when we finally press that off, that sugar jacks my wine chemistry out of sight. Now I have a wine that has high sugar, which will either lead to a hot fermentation, or I'll have to dilute water down and dilute the whole fermentation so I can get it to finish fermentation. Neither one you want to do. You're putting strikes against your harvest, if you will. So this Blanc gets rid of all those raisins and guarantees that I'm going to have pristine fruit. Doesn't save the harvest, but it certainly helps out a lot. That and night harvesting are probably, if you wanted to put a percentage point on it, probably increased the success of Pinot Noir by at least 20%. All right, the next one is Cabernet, the King. I swear, I wish I could do an Elvis impersonation. Anybody do an Elvis impersonation? Anybody? No? No Elvis? Joe?
Don't have it.
Don't have it? How about peanut butter and jello sandwich? No, what is it? Not a peanut butter, it's a banana and, well, anyway.
Yeah.
All right, so we got geology here. That's what Cabernet is all about. Sonoma County has it. Sonoma County has two unique geologies. The Sonoma Coast is geared towards Pinot, and then inland is volcanic, and it's geared for the warmer grapes, the Bordeaux varieties and Zinfandels and things like that. And why? Because of volcanics. So our vineyards are located in Sonoma Valley, what Jack London called the Valley of the Moon, I said earlier. And what happens is when the weather comes off the Pacific, it hits Sonoma Mountain and it gets pushed. It gets pushed south down into what's called the Petaluma Wind Gap. And that helps the Caneros out. We saw that. It helps with the fog and the wind. It keeps that area cool. The other half gets pushed up into Lake County. And well, it does whatever it does in Lake County. But what happens importantly here is it comes up over Sonoma Mountain and it gets pushed down the valley, and then it gets caught on the other side of the valley on the Mayacamas Mountains that separate Sonoma Mountain, and it warms up there. So now I'm in a little hot pocket, a natural hot pocket, like a geological hot pocket, kind of like that snack food, hot pockets, right? I got a nice geological hot pocket. Plus it's where the volcano blew out, kaboom, kaboom, kaboom. This is giving me all sorts of soils of basalt, red aggregate, welded tufa, obsidian, breccia, all piled on each other, repeating. It's freaking geological lasagna. It's the most amazing soils to grow Cabernet, and it's warm, which this thick-skinned Burgundian fruit loves. So we bring the grapes in, just like you saw with the Pinot Noir. At night, they go through the Blanc, and now they go into these fermenters for about 26 days, where we punch down, get those beautiful flavors. And this is where we add in a little love. We add in a little Merlot, a little Cabernet Franc, and a little bit of Malbec. And you got to think of Cabernet like this, right? Cabernet is the king, right? But he's tough. So he needs a little softening. And that's what Merlot does. Merlot softens up the Cabernet. Think of Cabernet like if the wine was your body, then Cabernet would be your muscles that would give you your form. But Merlot would be like the skin that went over your muscles to give you a little bit of suppleness, right? And then Cab Franc is added to add a little bit of fleshiness to the wine, a little bit of girth in there to give it on your palate, a little weight. If that was a human body, that would be your love handles. In my personal blend, I got a lot of Cabernet Franc. And then there's a little bit of Petit Verdot, and that's like sinew to kind of hold yourself together. And this holds the wine. It adds acid and color to this wine. And then we age it. Pretty simple, 18 months in French oak barrels, and you get this beautiful Cabernet. Now, sure, you want to say steaks, but I love this wine with a good cheeseburger, with a nice meaty pizza, with spaghetti bolognese, because it's got that Merlot in there, so it's not going to tie your tongue into a bowl-end and rip the enamel off your teeth. So those the four wines. Now, what I didn't mention is the thing that why we're talking about these wines in Earth Day. My family was very instrumental. We were pioneers in what's called biodynamic farming. Biodynamic is kind of the Rolls Royce of organic farming, if you will. If you think of a bullseye, right? A bullseye, that circle, that whole circle is sustainability. And then the inner ring is organics, and the bullseye is biodynamics. Organics is the elimination of chemical inputs. Biodynamics is the elimination of chemical inputs while replacing the biological capital in the vineyard after you've used and harvested the grapes. Because remember, farming is resource intensive. Take. You have to add that back in. So my family learned very early on that we needed to repair the land as we farmed it without using chemical inputs, right? We were all, when we first got to California, we did the old spray and pray, right? The Monsanto guy would show up, he'd give us a big bag of methyl ethyl bad stuff, and we go nuke our vineyards. And what ends up happening is once you nuke the vineyards, all that sediment, all that all that poison falls down onto terra firma and it kills the biggest biomass on the planet, topsoil, right? So now what do you got to do? You got to go put fertilizers down. You put fertilizers down and water them so that the plant has something to eat, because all that plant mat, all that organisms that died collapsed the soil. It's hard pan. It either washed away in a gully washer, or now it's hard and the roots have a hard time getting through. So now we have to put fertilizers down there. Here's the problem with that. The plant loves it, and the plant looks very healthy. You have big green leaves and nice big grapes. But those grapes are now water balloons because they don't have any terroir, because they're being fed at the surface. It's almost like it's on an IV. The root system is very anemic and it's very shallow. We don't want that for a number of reasons. One, we don't want to poison ourselves. And two, we want wines that have character. So what do? Instead of having a vineyard hooked on drugs, we're going to not push nature out. We're going to invite nature in. Instead of talking to the Monsanto guy, we're going to talk to an entomologist, a bug guy, and say, hey, what is a natural way to take care of these predators in the vineyards that we were killing with chemicals? And so what he would do is he would find out what the predators were, and then basically find the animal or insect that would kill it. Kind of, if you grow it, they will come. So we grew these gardens. These gardens were about 1.5 acres size. And these were like Mardi Gras for insects, but rather they were more like a dating service. They were like Tinder for insects, because this would attract insects and then they propagate and then they'd go out into the vineyards. Dragonflies, ladybugs, wasps, spiders, you name it, would jump in these gardens and propagate and then fly out. This was an amazing place. Hopefully this little film works. This was what our insectary looked like this August. A little moment of zen here. But all these plants are fostering insects and animals that fly out into the vineyard and eat the bad bugs. But it's also attracting hummingbirds, bluebirds, owls, bats, raptors, vultures. I mean, we have the most paranoid rodents in Sonoma County. They keep getting eaten. So this is what it's all about. So now we don't have to spray any chemicals, which is awesome. So now the soil can start repairing itself. But as I said before, farming is resource intensive. Take. So we have to replace that biological capital. And we do it 2 ways. We do it with what's called cover cropping, where we literally take in between the rows, we plant plants like legumes that pull nitrogen from the air and store it in the soil and break down naturally so the plants can eat that nitrogen. Or we compost with animals. We have a herd of Scottish Highlanders, the coolest cow in the world, the hairy coo. They look like surfer cows. And this is a picture of Flower and Daisy the other day. They're actually very pregnant. So we're going to have a few little baby calves here in a day or about a week. But the real workers are my sheep. But before we get to them, the girls wanted to, I filmed this last night. The girls wanted to say a little message to you guys there in New Hampshire, because I know you guys like your cows there too. She's going to come up and give you a kiss here. See, there you go. Got to feel good about yourself there, huh? So, but the real workers are my sheep, all right? I have a flock of what are called Dorpers, and Dorpers are little sheep, and they're little indestructible sheep. I love them, tons of personality. And they actually cruise underneath the grapevines, and they have 3 big jobs. In one step, the little cloven hooves are marching down on the debris in the vineyard so that the worms and the microbes can eat it. So they're cleaning the vineyard floor. Then they're eating all the grass and plants underneath the vine. So now I don't have to spray any Roundup. Glyphosate is ubiquitous in farming, and it's over time, it's very destructive. Here we get to eliminate all that Roundup. And then third, they're dropping the golden turd out the back end, fertilizing as they go. They're amazing. And then I move them around our vineyards with my dog Blue. We just march them around and block by block, and they eat and fertilize, eat and fertilize. And it's adds a real beauty to the ranch. It's basically how our grandfathers farmed before we got overly efficient with machinery and chemicals. But this is what it's all about: deep root penetration. This was a root study done out of the University of Washington by a professor named John Todd. And he studied root systems in organic and conventional farming methods. And he found that the root system in a conventional farming method was anemic and shallow because it didn't have to work hard. It stayed near the surface because it got everything it needed up there. And that's okay possibly for row crops. But when you want to talk about a vine crop, which you want a certain amount of character, it doesn't work because it's not getting any of the terroir. So on the right is what an organic vine root looks like. Look how deep that is. It goes much deeper. And that's important because, like I said before, we're on geological lasagna. We want those soils or limestone or whatever the soil is. But every time the root systems go down through the subsoil into what's called the regolith, those fractured layers of bedrock, they send out lateral root hairs, and then those minerals go up into the vine, into the grapes. And now that wine is getting, the grapes are getting the fingerprints of what's underneath the ground. So that's so important. So now this wine, instead of just being varietally correct, now it tastes like something special. Remember, every bottle of wine is a mini time capsule, right? All the trials and tribulations of that growing season are in this bottle of wine. Now we have the fingerprint of that. We have the fingerprint of the varietal. We have the fingerprint of the vintage. We have the fingerprint of the vineyard. And if we're lucky, we can get the fingerprint of the winemaker. And you can think of that as water being the varietal, earth being the vineyard, air being the vintage, and fire being the passion of the winemaker. And you get all that, now you have something special. Now you have a beautiful bottle of wine. And that's why we do it this way, because ultimately you want your wine to reflect where it's grown. And this is the vineyard for the Cabernet, and this is what we want it to reflect. We don't want it to be that cold, gray, dead vineyard that you saw earlier. We want it to reflect where it's grown. So all these wines, whether it's the Sauvignon Blanc, the Chardonnay, the Pinot Noir, or this Cabernet you're drinking now, all these wines use sustainable farming techniques. Some of them organic farming, some of them biodynamics, depending on the blending, in order to get the flavors that we have in this wine. And we've been doing it for over 40, we've been farming for over 40 years. We've been farming sustainably for over 25. Like I said, we were pioneers. We were amongst the first handful of growers, the first in Sonoma or Napa, actually. And we're very proud of this because not everybody agreed at the beginning. There's a great quote from Gandhi that says, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. And that was kind of our arc with organic farming, biodynamics, and sustainable, because not everybody wanted to change. And we had to kind of prove it to them. And when they heard some of the funny things we were doing, like clearing land to put a garden in the middle of your vineyard or letting animals run loose, they thought we were nuts. But now every winery in California has some, or if they're smart, have some form of sustainability, because that's what the customer wants. So they're Johnny-come-latelys in my book. The early growers like the Paul Dolans of the world, the Fetzer families, these, and a lot of European growers as well, they knew early on that this was how you got wine with a sense of place. Now, I'm not talking world class, right? The best wines in the world, because we'll all argue all day long what the best is. Your best and my best are completely different, but we can argue what unique is. And this guarantees unique. And when you get unique and good together, or great, that's when you have world class. And this is the way to do it. So that's all I got, guys. I hope you liked it.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. We have some questions for you.
I hope so.
So Dawn on Facebook and Tracy here on Zoom are both curious about your Scottish Highland cows. How did you get those guys in California?
So we got them from Long Meadow Ranch up there in way up in Napa. We looked high and low. What's the saying? High and low, or whatever. High and far. We looked in a lot of different places, and we found these ones for a couple reasons. One, they're cool. They're just beautiful cows. And two, they're indestructible. And we didn't need them for meat or dairy. We needed them really to eat and poop. They don't have a lot of the disease that some of the more modern breeds of cow have. They don't really make particularly great meat or anything like that. So we love them, and they live a long time. They don't have a lot of diseases. They're pretty docile. They become part of the family, believe it or not. except the bull, Chewy. He can get kind of ornery. So we certain times of the year, we give him a wide berth. Other times, he's a gentle giant.
Awesome. Another question that came in, I'm just going to clarify for everybody. So for those of you watching on Zoom tonight, that means that you pre-registered for tonight's event and you received a coupon to get some Benziger family wines. We did have a question come in on Facebook asking, how do I get a coupon? And can you clarify how much the coupon is for? So unfortunately, if you're watching on Facebook, I can't send you a coupon because I don't have your email address. So please pre-register for future events on our Eventbrite page so you can get coupons. And Megan has clarified that the coupon is $2 off every bottle. So you can get 4 bottles and use the coupon, or you can get 1 bottle. I say get all 4 and give them a try now that Chris has told you all about them. So
you'll love them. You won't be disappointed, right? And it's springtime, so you don't know what the weather's going to be. It could be nice and warm, Sauvignon Blanc weather. It could be chilly, Cabernet weather. And then it could be in between, Pinot and Chardonnay.
All right, Chris, another question for you. So you talked about your family's history and how you kind of grew up with wine, but one of our viewers is curious, did you just learn as you went, or did you go to school or have any formal wine training?
So we got in it early, and yes, there was great courses at Fresno and UC Davis, and a lot of our winemakers went to those great courses. But early on, my brother Mike had when he trained directly under a great winemaker, and he learned it that way. My brother Joe did the exact same thing. I went out into the field and I worked under a guy by the name of Alan York, who was one of the most amazing biodynamic farmers. And there's, yes, I went to university. I got a minor in organic chemistry and a major in business, but working under Alan was the greatest experience because he taught me the reality of a vineyard. So I think that's not that I love education. I support it, but you also got to get that real life experience. There's a great saying, the best impression a winemaker can leave on his wines is his footprints in the vineyard. And that's really what it's all about.
Awesome. Next question for you, Steve, who is tuning in on Facebook tonight. He wants to know, how does organic farming affect crop growth in dry seasons, or even year-to-year variation of production and flavor profile?
Okay, so great question, Josh, right?
Stephen,
I'm sorry, Stephen. Great question. So our view and what we have seen is, if that grapevine after a few years gets deeper, it is definitely more protected in the drought years. It's like it's wearing a big leather coat. It's the more conventionally farmed vineyards with the shallower roots that suffer in droughts. Our root systems, in many times, have found their own sources of water and nutrition in the ground, so they're not as stressed out. Now, we always have, on a good year, we can dry farm almost all of our vineyards. And we do have drip irrigation, but that drip irrigation is only prophylactic. It's only if we're going to get a heat spell. Let's say we're going to get 1 or 2 days or 3 days of 100-degree heat. Then we want to put a little water near the surface so that the surface roots can put it up into the vine so the grapes don't raisin. That kind of keeps them from raisening, but it doesn't increase the harvest. So organics will lead, typically organic grapes have lower yields. And that's because we have to balance it, because we're not watering the fruit. Remember, we want to grow grapes that have those fingerprints. Now, if you're growing for production, that's a whole nother story. Then it's all water, water, water. Turn it on and grow those grapes. I mean, there's grapes in the Central Valley that get 18 to 20 tons per acre. That's 20 tons per acre. These vineyards you're looking at here, they're lucky if they get 2 to 2.5 tons per acre. It's a difference between a grape that looks like, the size of a $50 or a grape that's the size of a blueberry. So it's a big difference there. And it's also different price points. The grapes that are that big go into box wine. It's 6 of those big liter box wines, and those are fine. That's fun. Slap the bag. That's a good time. But if you want wines that are a little bit more distinction, then you have wines that have a little bit more of that vineyard designation. There's kind of that's the kind of thing. And I don't want to sound like a wine snob, because I've enjoyed many a good box wine when the time's right. You know, I just enjoy wine. Sometimes people go, "What's your favorite wine?" It's usually the one that's in my glass. But there's wines for every occasion. And where we live in Sonoma, this is not set up to do mass quantities. Sonoma and Napa are made to make wines that have terroir, and then other areas are geared more towards production. I think I went off the rails there a little bit. I'm sorry.
No, that was awesome. I am going to give you a little bit of a break because we've got a couple of questions for Lisa.
All right, Lisa.
Lisa, one of our viewers on Facebook is wondering if any of the wines Chris tasted tonight are eligible for our Wicked wine sale this month.
So yeah, sure. It's the Chardonnay and the Sauvignon Blanc. Both of them great wines. And we have the Sauvignon Blanc on sale for $10.99 right now. And with the coupon, it's a great deal. You have to take advantage of it. You really do. And the Chardonnay is on sale for $9.99. So those two wines do qualify.
Wow. A Sonoma County Chardonnay at $9.99. You guys are lucky there. That state is taking good care of you.
All right, Lisa, another question for you. I just lost it because now we have a bunch of questions coming in for Chris. I apologize. Oh, there it is. Okay. Are all four of the wines tonight readily available across New Hampshire, or are they only available in the larger stores?
So they are pretty much widely available throughout New Hampshire. The only one that is not, there's a few stores that may not have is the Pinot Noir. But you could visit our website, or if you have a specific store that you'd like to ask, I can let you know if it's in your favorite store. But they're all pretty much available.
Awesome. And so if anybody is curious, Lisa and I can look up inventory for you, or if you visit our website, liquorandwineoutlets.com, and search the four product numbers from tonight, it'll give you a pretty good estimation of which stores within a bottle or two.
Whatever store is near Newfound Lake, you may want to ship a couple more cases of Sauvignon Blanc up there. My brother Jerry, he likes the Sauvignon Blanc. We used to call him, we used to call wine called Fume Blanc, and he was Fume Jerry. He likes it.
You'll have to tell him about our Wicked wine sale then.
Yeah.
Our Wicked white wine sale.
He's supposed to be on this call. So if he is, he's gonna get back to me. I know that.
Awesome. So I just posted the product codes in the Zoom chat and in Facebook on Facebook in the comments section, excuse me. So if you do want to look for the wines near you. All right, Chris, a couple more questions for you tonight. Chris is going to a drive-through wine tasting after this, guys. How's that for an awesome Friday? So before we let him go, a couple more questions. Let's see, this question is from Joanne. She wants to know if there's any cross-working between your winery and Imagery.
Yes, yeah, Imagery is a sister winery. My brother Joe was the winemaker there, and he retired. He passed it on to my niece Jamie, and she is a little all-star. She's been working in the family business for the last 7 years. Prior to that, she was traveling around the world learning the craft of winemaking, and she's amazing. She just got best 40, the 40 under 40, which is the best 40 winemakers under 40 years old, and International Woman Winemaker of the Year as well. And she makes some amazing wines at Imagery, which is, just a couple miles away from Benziger.
Great. And this next question is for me, but it's because of a comment that Tracy left. Tracy left a comment on how cool the artwork of the bottle that you just showed was. So I was curious if you could show us a little bit closer and tell us, how do you get your label art?
All right, so this is really cool. We changed this label a couple of years ago to really convey sustainability more. And this is, you call it the circle of life, or the circle of sustainability. And first people would see it, they go, oh, it looks like a rough circle. But no, when you stare at it, you see that it represents the earth, and it's got the birds and the bees, the roots and the trees, and really all the aspects of sustainability are in gold around this. And you can see, birds and the trees, the roots, and it just kind of conveys everything we just talked about, because it's all fluid. It's all a circle that goes into it. So it's a very, very cool label when you look at it. And, wine is, you get a little bit more introspective as you drink more. And it's a good label to stare at because you see more and more when you're looking at it. It's a beautiful label. It's relatively new.
Cool. All right, Chris, last thing. It's not quite a question. It's not a question for you really, but I think it might be time for you to ask a question to our viewers.
All right. So we have a little game here for those that were paying attention. All right. This goes back to the early part of the presentation. What was the very, very first wine that the Benziger family ever made? And this is the wine that kind of put us on the stage. Can anybody remember?
So leave your answer in the chat on Zoom, and I'm going to take all the correct answers and pull a random winner. And Joe, do you want to show our winners, or not our winners, excuse me, our viewers, what they're going to be winning? There it is. Those of you on Zoom can see it's a bottle of olive oil from the winery. How cool is that? You can have.
Oh, sorry. If you look, you can see olive trees in that. We have 900 olive trees. These are Italian varietals. And we make a darn good olive oil every year, Mother Nature permitting. And that's a bottle of it. It's good stuff. It's biodynamic olive oil. It's, besides being right in Sicily or in Italy, it's the next best thing. It's pretty darn good.
So whoever wins, I hope that you have a theme. I hope you have a Benziger theme night where you cook with the olive oil, drink with wines. Lisa had said earlier in the chat that I think it was she thinks that the Cabernet goes really well with salmon. So you can have some Cabernet and salmon per Lisa's recommendation.
No, I was saying it was the Pinot Noir.
Oh, sorry, everyone.
That's okay.
Pinot and salmon, Lisa, you're absolutely right. That's one of my favorite combinations. I remember when I first had my piece of really good Pacific salmon, it was the greatest thing I've ever had. Boy, that Pinot was made to go with it.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
Right on. Well, thank you guys. This was a blast. I hope you had as much fun as I did.
Definitely. So we got a lot of correct answers. The correct answer is Sauvignon Blanc. I have put all the names into my randomizer, and the winner tonight is Daniel Watts. So Daniel, I will email you to get your address so we can get you your bottle of olive oil.
And it's going to be a new, fresh, unopened one. This is the one I use. Best in the world. I love it.
You know what,
I'm also a client.
The actual prize should be Joe and Tosca brings over the bottle of olive oil and then cooks you his meal. He's an amazing chef, by the way. He should have been on Iron Chef, but he was too honest and he had a conflict of interest. The guy is an amazing behind the stove. So anyway, sorry to sell you out there, buddy.
Well, I mean, I think that decides it then, Chris. When you come up to visit your brother, you and Joe will have to come to our store in Nashua with the kitchen, and we'll do a little food and wine pairing.
You know what? We should do that. We would have a blast. Joe, you got a chef. I'll sue, and then we'll sue chef, not sue like and we'll have a blast. We'll do it.
Oh yeah, love that.
Your lobster roll.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, thanks everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you, Chris. Enjoy your in real life tasting. We can't wait to have you here in New Hampshire for an in real life tasting. And yeah, everybody have a great weekend. We will be back next week. We've got a few more wine tastings next week with some other wineries that have some great sustainable efforts going on. So be sure to check our website, explore.liquorandwineoutlets.com. You can find all of our events there. The following week, we've got another couple of events. April is going to be a really fun month. We are going to have just a couple of events in May, but stay tuned because one of them is going to be pretty epic. So stay tuned and have a great weekend, everyone.
First of all, Lisa, thank you. Caroline, can you send me that blog? I couldn't see it. I'd love to see your blog.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. And then Megan and all the folks at Horizon are on. Thank you so much for all the hard work that you guys do. And Joe, what I got to say, you're the best.
It's a pleasure, Chris.
Thank
All
you,
right, take care,
Chris.
everybody.
Have
Thanks
a great
again.
Good night,
weekend.
everyone. Bye-bye.